The murmur of voices drifted on the air as thick shafts of afternoon sunlight painted the pristine floor. Bodies filled the small and beautiful ballroom. Regal guests stood in clusters, speaking with smiles and interested eyes. Servants moved about with silver trays topped with full wine glasses. Fingers gracefully picked up the glasses by their stems and handed them out to waiting hands. In the corner, minstrels played a peaceful melody while the guests glanced about, looking for the guest of honor. Dax stood by a dark curtain, gazed down on his glass of red wine, and a deep need to be anywhere else but here. Memories poured over his mind as he tried to distract himself so he wouldn't have to interact with the very people who came to meet him. The last month played out of Dax and Simon spending their time on the Shieldbrook estate. There was a lot of drinking, faux sword fighting, and laughter. Dax didn't know a thing about swords, but Simon was more than happy to share his knowledge. When Dax brought up that mages didn't use swords, Simon nodded and said now was the perfect time to learn, so he could be more dangerous to anyone who would challenge him. Dax remembered smiling, as he didn't believe what his dear friend said. It sounded more like an excuse for Simon to use Dax as a practice dummy. The mage didn't realize just how useful a dummy he was. Simon's skill with a sword was well beyond average, his family spending a considerable amount of gold on his training even before he attended Kinnerth Academy. Now, the spell sword seemed to only get better. Simon would disarm the mage in single moves, but Dax was improving too, and in time, it took 2 moves to disarm him. Dax was proud of himself until he was disarmed and the flat side of the blade struck his shoulder, sending him stumbling to the ground. Simon laughed, but would reach down and help him up every time. Dax tried to even the odds by having his friend drink before practice. It was yet another miscalculation, because the drink would relax Simon and make him even better, knocking Dax to the ground a few more times without breaking a sweat. Those were the good moments. The rest of the time, the best friends spent their time dodging Norman Shieldbrook. Simon's father was a hard, disciplined lord with considerably difficult routines and standards. Dax often watched as the elder Shieldbrook would train with Simon, their practices almost appearing like a battle of life and death. Simon's entire demeanor changed around his father, becoming serious and focused. Norman's expression would become hawkish around his son, pushing his son to always improve. It was in those times Dax was glad to be there, if only to make sure Norman didn't push things too far. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Simon's mother, Maria, was the perfect example of grace and hospitality. She ensured everyone was fed, comfortable, and enjoyed relaxed conversation when the moments arose. She was the cool touch to her husband's fiery personality. In small moments Dax was able to witness, Maria would counsel her son on how to use magic for attack and defense. She detailed the flow of mana and how to harness it. It was enlightening, Dax making his own mental notes and bowing to the beautiful lady of the Shieldbrook estate. Dax swirled his drink, lost to the memory of knowing he had nowhere to go for the month-long academy break, and Simon suggested he stay with him. The mage was hesitant, but when he saw the concerned look of going home alone in Simon's eyes, Dax smiled and accepted. Little did the 2 friends know, Norman would be very pleased to have the famous card mage staying with them for a time. Dax sighed. With Lord Shieldbrook's hatred for magic, Dax thought he might have an uncomfortable time on the estate. Instead, the elder Shieldbrook welcomed the mage with open arms. It caused Dax and Simon to glance at each other in odd concern, but over time, the true intentions for Norman's pleasant demeanor began to show. Nearly every other day, visitors would come to the estate to meet the young mage who changed the very nature of spellcasting. At first, Dax was unsure of himself, as regal lords and ladies came to meet him. They didn't ask too many questions. Instead, they poured compliments and praise on the mage, offering for him to visit their lands when he was finished with his studies at the academy. Some even went as far as to offer their homes for him to stay during breaks. It was strange at first, but Dax quickly saw through their pleasant expressions.
to keep listening to this audiobook. I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.